Nina D, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, absolutely. So we had a moment of magic in the 1.5 minutes we were chatting. I said I'm a Who fanatic, and then you showed us. Look at that, and that was not planned. It's a great coincidence. Just for our viewers who don't know you yet, you do just amazing, amazing stuff on the electric violin, and you're really a pioneer in the area. And I don't normally work off the notes too much, but your list is too damn long. So I printed it up. Just to name a few, you played with the Killers in front of some guy named Barack. Yeah, maybe people have heard of him.
Happened at
yeah. That's just beyond cool. Then you've got Michael Bublé, Beyonce, Tony Braxton, Deep Purple, and you will be our third Deep Purple guest. Cheap Trick, Wayne Newton, Johnny Mathis, Smokey Robinson, second guest with Trans-Siberian Orchestra, Donna Summer, Mary J. Blige, Regis, which is just so cool, and Tony Braxton. And you have a project which we'll have to hear about, Bella Electric Strings.
Yes, I have a few projects actually.
Well, we will cover all those. But one of the things I got your permission to do, and I have to pull it up on my phone now before we started, which I'm not kidding you. When I was on my YouTube little journey with you, I had physical goosebumps, like literal. So here we go. It's absolutely fantastic. I don't even want to shut it off, but
yes, there's a whole video up there on YouTube where I cover the violin and guitar parts from Baba O'Reilly and talk a little bit about how I got into that song.
Yeah, it was really fascinating. And I loved your appreciation for the song, and truly enjoyed, like, when I watch your videos, I love the way you set them up, because the first part you're talking about the technical challenges that you face when you take on a project like that. And then you get into the musical challenges, and then you give us the actual performance. And it's really cool to watch.
I like people to see that it is a process trying to translate a lot of these solos onto a violin, an instrument that most of these guitar solos obviously weren't written for. So it takes some time, and I really put a lot of thought into it.
And I'll tell you what, I as a new fan, really appreciate it. I think a lot of folks who would just sort of watch you, first of all, I think they could almost forget that it's a violin, because you so well approximate the guitar sound. But one of the things I picked up on, and I can't remember which performance it was, it might have been Hotel California, I forget which, but I loved the way that you didn't let us forget it's a violin.
That solo in particular actually works really well on violin because of all of the slides and everything like that.
Yeah. And I wonder, from an artistic point of view, how do you sort of engage in the process of technologically and musically replicating the lead that we all know in the back of our heads, that have just been burned into our heads, and then still I'm not even going to say make it your own, but make it belong to the violin also? How do you sort of walk that line?
Well, there's a couple ways to do it. You can find a lot of violin covers of guitar solos on YouTube if you look for them, but most of them are sticking to the integrity of the violin. They sound like a violin playing solo. And I wanted to kind of try and replicate the original tones, the original sounds, and the original style as much as possible, with the the intention of these new violins, especially these violins that have 6 and 7 strings on them, can kind of replace a guitar, a lead guitar in a band if possible, which is kind of what my production show is based around. It's based around these electric violins replacing guitars. And so my process goes from taking music that I love. So I already know the solos. They're already in my head because I've been listening to years. Classic rock is the kind of music I grew up on. And so and then the challenge comes to a guitar is tuned in fourths and a violin is tuned in fifths. So some of the things that work easily in the fingers on a guitar don't work so easily on a violin. And you can't just move up a fret, a fret, a fret, and have every exact same fingering. It doesn't work that way. If you move to second position, your fingerings are totally different than first position and third position and everything else. So for instance, when I covered the Beatles, The End, which trades off between Paul, George, and John in the actual
Right.
Abbey Road. I had to figure out how to play some of these things to make them sound like the actual part. Because if I just played the notes, sure, I played the notes, but it didn't sound like the original solo. I actually had to tune 3 violins 3 different ways. And the third one,
Wow.
power chords, and tuned it like a guitar so that I could play kind of power chords the way that John did in that real gritty section. And I actually bent the string to emulate a guitar bend, which is pretty much impossible unless you're in a super low string that's really loose. You can't even bend the high strings on a violin. There's too much tension.
Right.
So I
Right.
try as much as possible to keep it sounding original.
And I love the fact, and I've watched some of your unboxing videos too, that you might need to get yourself a brand new product for a brand new project, right?
This is absolutely true. So, I originally only had a 5 string violin. A regular violin has 4 strings, and a
Okay.
5 string adds a low C string, so you have the range of a viola or a violin. But a guitar, the lowest string on a guitar is a low E. So for me to be able to hit those notes in the correct octave, without having to move the solo up an entire octave and play it in the wrong range on the violin, I needed
Right.
a string, which on a violin would be F. So that means I still have to tune that string down a half step to hit that low note. So in the covers that I've done of Purple Haze and Whole Lotta Love, I've tuned that low 6 string down to an E so that I could hit the full range of the guitar. And then, of course, it's changing all of your fingering when you're learning the solo, because instead of playing in fifths like you're used to, now you have this low string that's at a completely different fingering. And now I own a 7 string violin, so I don't even need to tune any strings down. I have strings down to a low B flat, so I can pretty much range bass, guitar, cello, viola, and violin all on one instrument.
That's beyond fascinating. How many electric violins do you own right now?
Well, let's see. I produce a couple shows where we have a string quartet that is in the show, so I probably own 3 full quartets of instruments, Yamaha,
Wow.
2 Yamaha quartets, and then an LED quartet for when we do these light up shows with these acrylic kind of clear violins. And then for me personally, I own, well, let's see, there's a couple of them here, but I probably own maybe 5 to 7 electric violins that are for me personally. And then I own 2 acoustic violins.
Wow. And then I see you got some bass guitars, and I'm guessing I see an acoustic guitar, unless it's an acoustic bass behind you.
That's an acoustic bass hanging up. I
Okay.
decided at one point that I didn't really want to play the violin anymore after I got my master's degree in classical violin. It was so stressful. I was like, I want to play the least stressful instrument possible. So I took up bass
All
guitar.
right.
I joined a band in Las Vegas, and I played 6, 7 nights a week in the Las Vegas lounges on bass guitar. So for a while, that's what I did
Oh, that's good stuff.
until I had detoxed from the high stress violin playing.
That's yeah, because you really buy a lot of work for yourself with what you've chosen, right?
The more versatile you can be, and the more instruments you can play, and the more styles you can play, the more work you'll do, I think.
Yeah, and that's why I think where we started on this show today is that your backstory is so critical, because I think as I watch the video now, I can truly appreciate in a way that I might not otherwise have what went into it. Like there was one you chose a wooden electric violin for part of it, and then you were electric. That might have been Hotel California.
I think on Baba O'Reilly, I played an acoustic violin that was mic'd up for the violin solo portion, and then I played the
Oh,
electric
okay.
violin for the Pete Townsend guitar parts.
Yeah. So here's a confession on my part. So I've been a Who fanatic since Who Are You, which is either 78 or 79. I think it's 79, I think. And I don't think I was even aware of the fact that there was a violin in it. So,
Well,
I,
Baba O'Reilly at the end, when the Who does it live, sometimes they have a violinist with them, and a lot of times Roger Daltrey plays harmonica on that end.
right.
So because they're so used to seeing him do the harmonica part, a
You're
lot
right.
get that it was originally a violinist doing it.
Right. And you're right, because the visual that I would always get, I've seen them probably 10, 12 times, not like 100 or anything, but yeah, I'm used to seeing Roger on harmonica. And because you just said the word harmonica, I watched you with fellow Princeton resident John Popper do Devil Went Down to Georgia on stage as opposed to a studio recording, which looked like so much fun.
It was a lot of fun. It was kind of a last minute thing. And, he's a virtuoso on the harmonica.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
greatest. And so we got together about 10 minutes before the start of that show. He's like, all right, see if you could follow along here. Here's what we do. We do this, and this in the form. And then we got out on stage and it was the fastest version of Devil Went Down to Georgia I've
Oh
ever
my God.
been asked to play in my life. But it was a lot of fun to play with them.
Yeah, they did. They went hog wild with the speed there. I noticed that. And I was watching you because he was kind of doing his own thing on a harmonica. I don't think he was trying to say, all right, this is what I'm going to do. And, and you were keeping up with him every step of the way, obviously. But I saw him just kind of doing what he wanted to do on the harmonica, right?
He's got his whole thing that he does to that song, and usually he does it alone. And so for me to sit in, he kind of was like, all right, you take this part, I'll take this part, you take this one. And I
Yeah.
had to remember it really fast and then get on stage and keep up with their tempo. But it was a lot of fun, especially the devil solo in the middle of it.
Oh, I know. It was absolutely great. And then I was unclear sort of the guitar intro for you, when you're the guy who's, fighting the devil. But it worked. He kind of did almost bar chords, like power chords to give you your intro before that solo. But then the band gave you a perfect backdrop once you did your solo. I thought it was great.
Yeah, they're all incredible musicians and blues travelers.
Yeah.
I've seen them a few times and I got to sit in with them that one time. And, it was really a great experience to play with such wonderful musicians.
Yeah. I lived in Princeton for years. So we would see John Popper hanging around the Tiger's Tail. Don't you have Jersey connections? Are you originally from Jersey or no?
New York. So
Oh, okay. East Coast, but not Jersey. Yeah. But yeah, we used to see him, I would just see him around town, just in the local bar scene back in, I guess, the very early 90s. We'd see him and the guys from Spin Doctors, because I know those bands, they were kind of friends with each other.
yeah, it came up around the same time.
Yeah, it's good stuff. So let's go back a little bit in time. Um, so when did you first, at what age did you first become a serious musician, or at least take up anything?
Well, I asked my mother, kind of when it started, and they had a piano in the house, and my mother was kind of a casual player. She'd play, she took some lessons as a child, and so we had a piano. And she said when I was as young as 2 or 3 years old, I'd kind of push her out of the way when she'd be playing the piano and pick out tunes and start playing them. And she said by the time I was 6, I was asking for lessons myself, and that's when she decided to put me in lessons. So it started on classical piano lessons at age 6, and then
Wow.
in school in 4th grade we had to choose an instrument, either a band or an orchestral instrument. And it's a kind of a funny story how I ended up playing the violin, because they sent us a sheet home with all the instruments and they said, put your first, second, and third choice instrument down. And then, we'll kind of decide who's going to go to the orchestra and who's going to go to the band and blah, blah, blah. So I, at the time, I was really into 1950s music. And so I wanted to play the saxophone because every 50s song had a sax solo in it. And
Right. Yeah.
was really popular, and Lisa Simpson played the saxophone. So between all of those things, I put first choice tenor sax, second choice alto sax, third choice bari sax, and I sent it back to school. And the band director called me into his office and he said, okay, he said, we have a lot of people who want to play the saxophone right now, and you're really, really small. He's like, I don't think you're going to be able to carry the saxophone to and from the bus stop every day and into school. He's like, how about you play the violin? It's a lot lighter for you. And I was just like, okay. And that's really how I started playing the violin. It wasn't my choice. I didn't want to play it. I just did it just to be easy. So
So it literally, see, your whole career is based upon the weight of an instrument to and from a bus stop,
that's
as
right.
perceived by some, guy in your school X number of years ago. That is a great story.
Yeah.
So if you were a superhero, that would be a great backstory as as the violin
Yeah,
superhero you are.
it's on someone else's choice for me and not my own. So
Yeah, and it worked out. Maybe it was divine providence, you know. But that's really cool. So here you are in 4th grade. You start playing the violin, and then do you have memories as to how you felt about the instrument, or is it kind of just a blur at that point in your life?
I remember practicing. I remember doing all of the technique stuff that you learn as a young violinist with the pencil to keep the bow straight and the positioners to hold the bow correctly and practicing the plucking first and then the bow over and over. And I remember really liking a lot of the classical repertoire that I had already known from Looney Tunes cartoons. Just
All right.
so a lot of that stuff, learning how to play it, I had already heard in the cartoons, which I think kids these days, they don't get a lot of that from the newer cartoons. I'm glad they were still on
No.
when I was a kid. But
Yeah.
I was excited to do that. And as far as back as I can remember, as soon as I could play the instrument, I remember picking out the melodies to Beatles songs. And my dad was a casual guitar player. He's a police officer, but he strummed some chords and, would teach himself a few songs here and there on guitar. And he'd strum the chords and I'd pick out the melodies to the Beatles songs and we'd play while my mom was cooking dinner at night. So I have some early memories of still wanting to play, classic rock music.
So it was now, where was the classic rock in your life at that point?
It all kind of comes down to when I was young, my father was really into 1950s music. He had a friend and, the two couples would go on to sock hops and things like that. So my early exposure was like Jackie Wilson, Elvis, stuff before the Beatles. Everything pre-Beatles was what I was exposed to. And then my mom was a finance manager at a college in upstate New York. And
Okay.
I believe, about 11 years old. A group called Beatlemania was coming to perform
Hmm.
at college. And because she worked there, she got free tickets. And so she asked if me and my best friend and my best friend's mom, we all wanted to go to the show. So when we went, it was kind of like we, as 11-year-old kids, myself and my best friend, experienced Beatlemania for the first time in the 90s, because
Right. Yeah.
we listen to these songs and we're like, I feel like we know all these songs, even though we don't know all these songs. There's something super special about this music. And they did such a great job of emulating their personalities. At that point, I went home and I went into the basement and my parents still had a record player and I found my mom's old Abbey Road album. And that entire summer, my best friend and I listened to Abbey Road over and over and over again. And from there, we went to every other Beatles album. And from there, we moved on to Led Zeppelin and Pink Floyd and The Doors and The Who and Chicago. And that it kind of all stemmed from going to see Beatlemania when we were 11,
Wow.
that we discovered all this classic rock music, 30 years after it was new, or more, 30
Wow.
or after it was new.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Because certainly introducing the Beatles, I think, was 64,
Right.
something like that. Yeah, which is my first album I ever bought.
So definitely it was more than 30 years later.
Wow. And then what's really cool, I think, is that because you saw Beatlemania, you were that 11-year-old kid, just like in 1964, the teeny boppers, because you were getting that experience. You weren't just getting, a cover band who didn't look like the Beatles, where you would just appreciate the songs. You were getting all those little things that made the young kids scream and go crazy.
Sure. And we went down the rabbit hole. We watched all the Beatle movies. I think I've seen every interview John Lennon has ever given. Their personalities like completely captivated us decades after. I was never even alive at the same time as John Lennon, and he's my biggest hero. So
Wow.
really had a special thing in space time that I don't think will ever be duplicated again. But we were
No.
kids and we were immersed in all of it like it was 1964.
That's really cool. I remember I saw the Who at what was then called the Garden State Arts Center, probably around 1993 or so. And I already felt old at that point. But I saw a lot of guys and I saw a lot of young girls, like 16, 17, at a Who concert, not with their parents. And I was really gratified to see at least some younger kids, who were way outside of, sort of the typical demographic for the who were appreciating that.
Definitely. It's great to see. And I experienced the same thing at a Paul McCartney show here in Las Vegas right before the pandemic. My son was 3 years old at the time, and
Right.
he obviously knows a lot of this music because I listened to it. And so I took him to see Paul McCartney. It was a last minute decision, and the tickets were really
Wow.
10 rows off the stage and on the floor. And, I took him, and we have these videos of him singing. I think he opened with Junior's Farm, like a lesser known solo McCartney song. And there's my son
Yeah,
to Junior's Farm at 3 years old. So I'm like, I've done my
you
job.
have.
Music.
I thought for years as a parent I had failed in that regard. I'll see if I could find the text while we're chatting. And then I find out from my daughter, who I thought really was not a fan of the kind of music I like, not only loves the Beatles and the Stones. I'm looking for the text right here. Um, but she likes the Stones a little more, which is my taste. But I really thought that my kids had just failed in that. And I'm going to show you a text I got from my son. If I could find it, I'll probably fail. I won't be able to get it. But he wrote me a text. He simply showed me, this is great. It said Baba O'Reilly on his car. And he said, "You'd be proud of me, Dad." So it was pretty cool stuff. But the fact that you're doing it this early on is even better. They resisted the hell out of with all my music. They wanted to hear whatever was new when they were younger. But I guess it sunk in.
Yeah, mine are used to they've been used to the Beach Boys, the Beatles, Led Zeppelin, Queen from a pretty young. I mean, my daughter is one, so she's already, you know, into anything with a beat, really. It doesn't
Oh,
matter.
that's great. That's good stuff. Now, what do you think it is? Here we are, it's 2022, and there is something magical and captivating about, what we all now call classic rock. And you made a comment before that at least I agree with, which is that on some level, it's not really getting replicated. Maybe it never will. But what is so special to you about that period of time of music, say like, mid to late 60s up to maybe very late 70s, early 80s?
I think that there are so many different factors about why it was special, some of them completely non-musical even. When you think of what was going on in the world in the 60s
Hmm.
and the 70s, I mean, you have Vietnam, you have people dying, you have civil rights going on. There was a lot of turmoil. There was in the early 60s, the Cuban Missile Crisis and the Cold War started, so many things were happening at the same time. And when I think about similar things that are happening now in the world, is anyone turning that into art now, though? I mean, when you think
Right,
how many great protest songs came out of the Vietnam War, how many great
right,
civil rights songs came out of that era, and now we have similar issues going on in the world, but none of the people who are famous right now seem to be really using it to channel it into this amazing timeless art that they did in the 60s and 70s. And so I think part of it comes down to that. There was such a strong emotion tied to the things that they were writing about. It was honest music, it was emotion,
right.
and it was music that changed the world. And I think more than anything, more than even the great guitar solos and the great lyrics and the great way that the music was written and the catchy melodies and harmonies, I think that the way that it was honest music means more than anything.
Yeah, that really does make sense. And I wonder too if there is a little bit of innocence about it. I mean, there always was a music industry, with our little air quotes around it. I always talk about the fact that I think it was Ray Davies would take a razor blade to his speaker to get distortion, to just sort of slice it up a little bit. He wasn't spending X number of dollars that we can all do today to get this effect to create that sound. And like they were using physical tape, nothing was digital. I wonder if that adds to it on any level.
Sure, the innovation that they were all experiencing, like what did Jimi Hendrix have to work with? A wah wah pedal and an
Yeah,
amp.
right, right,
And, he didn't have the options that we have today, but these are the people who pioneered a lot of this stuff. And a lot of what we have now wouldn't even exist without them experimenting. And again, I come back to the Beatles, who had so many firsts in their music, their backwards recordings for the first time. And I think
right.
To Get You Into My Life may have been the first time that a horn section was used in a pop song like that. And it was, I think, one of the early inspirations for Chicago and one of the only cover
Mm,
songs they ever did in their performance careers. So yeah, a lot of things were being innovated at that time and people had to get a lot more creative. And it seems like younger people were doing really meaningful things back then as well. I mean, like I'll reference Bob Dylan. I think the Freewheelin' Bob Dylan record came out in 1963. He was like, what, barely over 20 years old at that time. And he's writing songs that were on that album, like, Hard Rain's Gonna Fall and Masters of War. This is a young 20 something. What has anyone done anything comparable to that level of quality of art? I mean, now I don't know. I'm sure someone has, and I just haven't heard of it. But that stuff was mainstream back then, I guess. what was mainstream then and what is mainstream now are different.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I'll sit here, as a guy over, I'm 57, right? And I'm listening to music where I my whole life have worshipped on some level what was accomplished by whatever musician we're chatting about, right? And these are folks, you're right, who did it in their early 20s. So they really are great accomplishments. How insightful the lyrics are, the creativity of what they did with their instruments, and they're doing it with so much less at their disposal. Like you talked about Hendrix, what he figured out with those Marshall heads and the big cabinets or his Sun amps, where he would figure out how to create that feedback by sheer volume, and putting his strings in front of a speaker so that the speaker would make the strings vibrate, and then the strings would make the speaker vibrate, and you get that amazing back and forth. I mean, it was really spectacular what he did.
For sure.
You know,
I had the chance to see him live. He's one of my guitar heroes. And
yeah,
I mean, yeah, the age of these people when they were doing these things, even I don't know if you've seen the Get Back special about the Beatles, but
no,
that whole thing, George Harrison is barely even 25, 26 years old. The Beatles have had their entire career and he wasn't even
right.
close to 30 yet. It was just crazy how young they were to be doing so much.
Yeah, it is. And I guess, I mean, Paul is just barely 80 now, right? Maybe 79 or 80, I think.
I think that he will be 80 in June, actually, this year. He's
And
70.
that's young because, in 64, he was famous. Like, you know, that's crazy to think of.
It's
Nearly 60 years ago, he was famous.
and slowly watching all of my heroes get old and retire and, pass.
Yeah.
Yeah, David Bowie was a rough one for me because it was so unexpected.
Hmm.
But a lot of them I didn't have the chance to ever see live. I just wasn't around at the time. But I'm glad
Yeah.
I've gotten to see Paul McCartney twice, and I've gotten to perform with a couple bands that I love, like Deep Purple and Cheap Trick. So that was really cool.
Yeah. That's amazing. Talk about Cheap Trick a bit. When did you tour with them, or when did you perform with them?
Time I played with them, they had a residency in Las Vegas, and they did the music of Sergeant Pepper for this residency.
Wow.
And Jeff Emmerich was here working on it, and I got to meet him. And they had a backing orchestra, so I had gotten to perform with them a few times in the backing orchestra. And I remember, because Rick plays the checkerboard guitar, and I had
Yeah.
checkerboard Vans sneakers on. And it wasn't with the dress code of what the orchestra was supposed to wear, but because I was a fan of Cheap Trick, I wore these shoes, and whoever hired me for the gig actually yelled at me about having the shoes on the dress code. But then Rick walked past us backstage and he goes, "Hey, nice shoes." And then I was like,
Oh, that's great.
"It's okay." And so it was kind of a funny moment because a lot of these other musicians didn't know who Cheap Trick was or know any of their music before they came to play the gig. But that was the first time I played with them. The second time, I had actually created my own production show called Femmes of Rock. And before COVID, we were touring all the time. And on one of our tour dates, we were opening for Cheap Trick and Bad Company in Green Bay, Wisconsin. And so we ran into Rick and Robin Zander at the hotel the night before, and they remembered me from the Vegas show, and we were talking, and they ended up asking us to sit in on Dream Police. So that night, I wrote
Wow.
a really quick string quartet arrangement, like all night long, and we memorized it. And the next day, we got up on stage and we played Dream Police with Cheap Trick in the show that we opened for them on.
Oh, that is super cool. A song, by the way, I listened to as recently as last night.
Nice.
Yeah, they're one of my favorite bands. They bring such sort of positive, fun, and irreverent energy.
And they're
You
this
know,
off stage. They're such nice. They're one of the nicest groups that we've ever worked with. You always worry that people that you enjoy their music are just going to leave a bad taste in your mouth when you meet them in real life. But Robin and Rick are super nice people.
are they as wonderfully, lovably nerdy as Rush?
Well, I think, well, obviously Rush takes it a little bit further with the
Yeah,
music, but I'm
yeah,
a huge Rush fan. And
same. Yeah,
I actually like even learned the violin solo to Losing It. My better half Brody that you met when he was testing the mic, he's a
yeah.
singer, and he, you know, did a tribute to Neil Peart when he passed away, and I learned the violin part, and it was really hard. But they're different kinds of nerdy, I think, you know.
Yeah. That's something. And then Deep Purple. I think we've had two guests who have toured with Deep Purple. But what was that like? Did you were they in Vegas, or did you do something different with them?
Cheap Trick was, man, I
Or
don't
or Deep Purple? I'm sorry.
remember the year that this was, but they did a series of tour dates where they had an orchestra backing them up. And so when
Okay.
they came through town, you know, the agent first thought of me because they're like, well, Nina's the classic rock person and she's a string player. So I put together the orchestra for them, and a lot of the performers that are in my Bella Strings show or my Femmes of Rock show were on the gig. And you know, they already had their charts already done, so it was kind of a backing gig for us where we read down the music with them. And I remember my chair was right behind Ian Pace, the drummer.
Okay.
And so I had forgotten to bring earplugs for the
Oh
gig.
no.
Probably the loudest experience of my life. I don't think I could hear for like 3 days after the performance because I forgot
Wow.
my earplugs. And then of course I read afterwards that I think for a while Deep Purple, they were in the Guinness Book of World Records for the loudest performance ever or something like that.
I
But
think I've read that. Yeah.
rocking, and it was pretty amazing to perform with them.
That would be good. And then I mean it would be amazing. Now how did you end up on Regis Philbin? Like that's
I believe that was a union gig. Actually, it was just a union contractor was putting together an orchestra for him when he was in town, and I got the call to go beyond that gig. I wasn't a soloist with him. I was just in the orchestra for that one.
that's neat stuff. So I guess, being in Vegas, I think sounds like it's really, really good for your career.
I think that Las Vegas is to the live music scene kind of what LA is to the session musician scene. There's a lot more session work in Los Angeles, you know, in the recording studio. And I think there's a lot more live music in Las Vegas. So, depending on where you want to go with your career, there's definitely a lot more better paid live music opportunities in Vegas, I think. And we have so many large arenas here and so many shows come through. And now it's kind of in fashion for these artists to have residencies here or mini residencies where Sting will come for 2 weeks and do a mini residency, or, you know, whoever will come and do a little residency. And so it's been a good place for me to get a lot of experience with some major artists before I branched out and decided to produce a show of my own.
Yeah, it seems like that. And I could think of a day when the term residency was a word no one knew, right? That probably in the last 10 years, 12 years is when that kind of became a thing.
A time when Vegas was the place musicians went to die, and that's not the case anymore.
Yeah, that's interesting. Now, how long have you lived in Vegas?
I have lived in Vegas for, let's see, probably around 15 years.
Oh, okay. So when you first got there, was that a thing yet? The residencies or not quite yet?
When I first came here, it was because I was offered a job with Wayne Newton to play in his show. And so he had obviously a residency here. And I knew of Wayne Newton because of the movie National Lampoon's Vegas Vacation with Chevy Chase.
Right.
I didn't
Yeah, yeah.
know of Wayne Newton other than that movie, but it was really exciting because he kind of became an icon again from that movie. And so that was my first gig. And then it was right around that time when these celebrity engagements, I think, started because
Right.
my second or third year here, Tony Braxton had a residency, and then I got the gig as for solo violinist for that residency. And after that, it just seems like more people started coming and more current stars started coming, and like even people with hits right now were coming. And now you've got pretty much everyone. I mean, there's hardly nobody that doesn't come through Vegas now.
That's what I would think. And you have, like, and I guess we can call it an iconic place, the Hard Rock over there, right? I mean, there's a certain street cred if you have a rock band and they're staying at the Hard Rock. I don't know why, but it's if we were to think of what we all, and I'm older than you are, but what we thought of Vegas, you couldn't imagine, say, Aerosmith in Vegas. You think, all right, like you said, that's where Aerosmith goes to die. But now there's some panache, if not a lot of panache, to being there, right?
Yeah, the Hard Rock's actually gone now.
Oh, shows what I know.
The whole hotel. And now Hard Rock has actually purchased the Mirage, the casino that has the volcano in the front where the Beatles
Yep.
show is. So pretty soon the Mirage will not exist, and there's going to be a giant guitar on the Strip, and the Mirage is going to be rebranded as the Hard Rock. So maybe
Oh,
those towns that just doesn't have much history because we knock our history down and build new stuff all the time. So
yeah. I haven't been there in years, but I don't gamble at all, and I love Vegas. It's
I
a cool
think
town.
I gambled $30 in 15 years here, and probably not with
Yeah,
me anyway. So
yeah. But it's just such a cool town. And you drive it just a couple of miles in any direction, and you've got gorgeous desert all around it.
right. That we actually filmed one of our Femmes of Rock music videos, probably 30 minutes from my house, that looks like it's in the middle of nowhere. We did a cover of
Yeah.
the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly theme song by Ennio Morricone that was in the Clint Eastwood movie. And so that's on our Femmes of Rock YouTube channel. And yeah, we filmed it like we drove 30 minutes into the desert, and it looks like this crazy, Hollywood
I
set.
watched it. Yeah, you guys did a good job with that. Whoever filmed it, you
Brody
got a
actually
good,
filmed that. He's a man of many production talents. So he, you know,
clearly.
set up this whole studio up here, but he did all the camera work and editing for that video as well.
He really replicated the look of like a 1950s, maybe early 60s. It was black and white, wasn't it?
Parts of it, I think, were in parts
Okay.
color.
All right. Now, I also saw you did a fun thing where you replicated iconic photos of rock stars and other folks
That
while
was
pregnant.
my maternity shoot. Most people go do a nice, like, elegant, flowy dress maternity shoot when they're pregnant. When I was
Yeah.
pregnant, two musicians, what are we going to do for our maternity shoot? So we decided to take my favorite photos of my favorite classic rock stars and replicate them with my big giant 9-month pregnant belly. So you can find those on my Instagram page or on my Facebook page. And we did Jimi Hendrix, Jim Morrison, Brian Wilson, John Lennon, even Geddy Lee.
Yeah, yeah. So it was just very clever, lots of fun, and a great homage. But what a clever spin, because you got your big gut sticking out.
We're going to continue that. And now the baby, now that she's born, we're going to do a third series of photos only with her doing the photos instead of me. So it'll be the original one, me pregnant, and then the baby in the same pose.
That's brilliant. That's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Now, is it a he or a she?
Girl. I have a boy and a girl. The young one is a girl.
So how do you know she'll cooperate?
Because I think she's a ham like her show business parents. So
Oh, so that'll work then. Yeah, because I noticed you were like replicating the exact body position of the people in the photograph. It was fun. It was silly and fun, and you guys did a great job in
thanks.
really replicating the pictures. Yeah, that's good stuff. Uh, so what are you working on these days?
Well, it's been a little bit crazy since COVID. It kind of changed everything. And the whole reason why I even have a YouTube channel and a TikTok channel where you've seen me do these videos is because of COVID. Because prior to that, I was too busy performing, touring, doing all the business stuff that comes along with that to even consider trying to film videos from home. So, and it's crazy because I have more of an online presence now than I did prior, even though I was working more prior. So it's just
Right.
a crazy thing. And now maybe coming out of all the COVID stuff, there'll be more of a balance between the two for us. But it's just been, like I said, just a crazy balance of trying to stay relevant in music when you're not able to tour, I think.
Right. And you've been doing a great job of it. Like, I think one of the sort of lessons we all learn, and every person I've interviewed on this show, and myself included in my day job, I'm a lawyer by day, is that hard work is really the way to go. And that's why I like your videos so much, because not only are you doing the hard work, and the hard work gives you that great product in your performance, but when you give us the step by step, there's young kids who can watch those and really learn and appreciate that that final product isn't coming out there just because you're naturally talented, which I'm sure you are, but there's a ton of elbow grease that's going into those.
Definitely. And I think that, a lot of what's happened in this instant gratification generation is that, you could take something like American Idol and you could be skyrocketed to fame and fortune and a tour immediately with no experience. But then you look
Right.
at how bands used to do it back in the 60s, like, the Beatles put their time in Hamburg before they were ever famous. By the time they were famous, they were a really great band. They were tight, they could play and sing perfectly without even hearing each other with screaming thousands of people around them. And I think that today, like that hard work leading up to the recognition is sometimes lost. And so you have people who are inexperienced who now are thrown into these positions of these really high profile performances. And I think it's just a little bit strange. And so I'm kind of happy that I did it the way that I did. I put in a lot of years of experience performing both in lounges and with major artists before I even started having an online career. And the funny thing is, the people who watch my videos, they're like, oh, you got to be doing something. It's like, I did. I did all that stuff. So, I'm
Yeah.
glad that I got the experience first so that you can kind of back it up when the online recognition starts to come.
And that's really interesting, because I'm thinking, you've got young kids, and I would imagine this gives you a lot more flexibility to be musically relevant, to keep acting artistically in your professional life, but be in the same building that your kids are in, right?
Yeah, and some days it's great and some days it's really hard, the days when there's like a lot of screaming and crying going on, I don't get much done. But it's also
Yeah.
to not have to be gone. I mean, both Brody and myself, we were here the entire first year of our baby's life. And
Right.
my son who's 6 now, that wasn't possible. I mean, I was touring so much still at that time. So it kind of just worked out where every single the first word, the first, step, the first crawl, the first everything, we were home for, which was really nice.
That's really good stuff. And then as you look forward, and the cool thing is you're still young, so even, like I'm on the other side of things right now, but say, 16, 17 years, you're still young. But as you go into the next stage, right? We're sort of coming out of COVID. I mean, it's still here, but it isn't today what it once was. What do you see in your professional and artistic life in terms of, um, any, if you want them, any supplements to your online musical presence?
Well, right now, my touring show, Femmes of Rock, we're just starting to get the toe in the water of putting tours together again. And
Right.
because the cost of flights is now double or triple what it was prior to COVID. And so
Right.
getting a contract offer at the same price that we got in 2019, sometimes we have to turn them down because it costs us, like I just priced out flights to Philadelphia for my band from Las Vegas. It was almost $10,000. I mean,
Wow.
hard to tour with those kind of costs unless you're Beyonce, I mean, so
Right.
it's hard. The performances are starting to come back, but the transportation costs especially are so high that we're not doing as many shows as we used to. So we're doing more corporate events and private events because the clients will cover the cost of travel for those types of things. So our performance has shifted a little bit from the public type stuff where people can buy tickets to come see our show to the private events where companies, corporations will hire us and cover our costs to do a performance, whether it be in Las Vegas or in another city where they're having their event.
That's great to have that option. And I think it's probably also reflective of all the work you already did. If you were just coming up right now, I bet you wouldn't be getting those offers.
Sure, it comes from a lot of years of networking and making friends in the industry. And my Bella Electric Strings group has been doing corporate events for, at least a decade. And the Femmes of Rock show began touring, I think, in maybe 2015 or 16. So it was nice to have both, to have the corporate option and the public show option. We have a lot of fun when we do public shows because you can interact with the audience. There are people who have purchased a ticket just to come watch you play. Whereas some
Right.
corporate events, your background music, you're doing, they're having a dinner and you're just there to smile and match the wallpaper. But
Right. Right.
so it's been good to have both of those options. So I guess my hope is that some of the public performances start to come back, that we're able to afford airfare again to make the shows profitable for us, and that we can keep going. And that hopefully the stuff that I've done online and that I'm going to continue to do will help build an audience for our touring show once we're back at it again.
I've seen your numbers, and I think it has to. I don't see how it wouldn't. You know, you get tons of views on your videos. It's really good. So I think you're doing a lot right with it.
Well, hopefully. And it's funny, the videos that hit, you know, a million views and the ones that don't, like, I thought for sure that when I covered Crazy Train that that one would hit a million views, and it didn't. It didn't really take off that much. But then I did this little snippet, A Whole Lot of Love, and that one got, you know, a couple million views. So who knows?
Yeah, it's very weird the way those things work. You know, on our little channel, our publicist was at the Rock and Roll Museum, or the Hall of Fame Museum in New York. He simply took his iPhone and took a video of Eddie's guitar. He just walked around it for a few seconds and posted that, and it blew up.
It's
There was
crazy.
nothing else to it.
You
Yeah,
never know what. It's not always the most difficult thing that I learn. It's not always the thing I spent the most time on. It's who knows. I have no idea. So I just
yeah,
doing what I love, and hopefully it's authentic enough that people will watch some of it. So
yeah. You read my mind with the word authentic. I think that's the key. If you're authentic, everything else will flow from that. You know.
and I think that I've kind of changed my image a little bit for these videos from home. I didn't, you know, when you're producing a show, you have to have photos and you have to have promo videos, and it's a whole image that you're doing.
Yeah.
You're dressed like, you know, with real rock kind of stuff on. We have like boots and leather and this and that, and it's a rock show. And when I went from home, I'm like, you know what? I when I do these videos, I don't want to dress like I do for the touring show. I just kind of want to
Right.
look like I look every day. So I wear my
Right.
shirts and my Converse, and that's kind of what I do. And it's just been funny to have the different image. I think it was a real positive thing for me to decide to dress like I do every day, because you don't know how many comments I get where people are like, "Thank you for not just trying to get views by exposing your skin online. We pay more attention to your playing because of how you're dressed." I'm like, "Well, okay,
Right. That's a good point. Yeah, and and a lot. You're right. A live show is very different. You know, I mean, something simple. Mick Jagger wears bright colors to look younger when he prances around. He wears the completely inappropriate colors for an 80-year-old man, but that's what he should do. You
yeah,
know, and it works.
yeah."
But yeah,
I wear on stage, I'm not going to go take my kid to kindergarten in. So
right, right. That's true. That makes sense. Now, as we're sort of, I took a quick look at the time, and as always, it's flying by. But let me talk a little bit with you about Bella Electric Strings. What is that project?
So Bella Electric Strings is our corporate product that I offer, and it is basically it started as a string quartet of electric string instruments that played a backing tracks, all different kinds of music: pop, top 40, classic rock, country, movie themes, classical crossover, you name it. We have hundreds of songs in the repertoire by now. And you can book the Bella Strings as anything from a solo violinist all the way up to like multiple, many electric violinists or acoustic violinists as an orchestra or anything like that. Our most popular options are the string trio and the string quartet, and they all play electric violins with effects pedals, two backing tracks. And it's mostly all private corporate events, weddings, things like that. So it offers quite a bit of work for a lot of string players. We have over 30 girls who are on our roster who perform with the Bella Strings in many different cities throughout the US. And, when we first started it, there weren't a lot of groups doing the electric string quartet thing, just a few. Now there's a whole bunch all over the world. So it's nice to still be working and to hopefully be maintaining the top level of quality amongst the competition now, this many years later. We're always trying to invent new products, new arrangements, new wardrobe to stay, on the cutting edge of it.
That's really cool. Now, so if someone watches this show and they're interested in Bella Electric Strings, where do they find you?
On bellastrings.com, our website, there's a contact form where they can ask for an inquiry. Also, we have presence on social media on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. I don't really know how to use Twitter, but we have a Twitter. But I'd say mostly Instagram and Facebook are the main ways that people will look at our videos and our photos, and then also our website for inquiries about how to book the group.
And then, do they look up Nina D or your full name that I did not try to pronounce
Sometimes
on our show?
look up Nina D Violin, you'll find me. If you look up Nina Digregorio, my full Italian last name, you'll find me that way too.
Right,
I'm not hard to find because there's not very many electric violinists with the name Nina. So,
right. That's how I looked you up.
it's
It was
me.
very easy. That and your email address. But yeah, but that was great. Well, I want to thank you so much for joining us on Guitar Tells. We were Scott Engel and I We're so excited to get you on. We've been watching your videos for a little while now, so we appreciate that you gave us your time for this. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and I'm glad that I'm now worthy of being on guitar videos and blogs.
You absolutely are. And I think I saw in one of your videos there were some six-string guitars behind you, so you're covered.
Oh, there's a few back here. The Strat is mine. The Van
There
Halen
you go.
is Brody's back there. So we all cover multiple instruments in this household.
That's what I would have thought. And look, we've had actors on who once played guitar. So it all works. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I'm really bad at stopping the recording, so I'm just going to kind of talk while I do that.
Okay.
Here.